What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Wednesday. It's Wednesday, right? Yeah, it's Wednesday. Wednesday, everybody. The Wednesday edition of the Stokastic NHL Strategy Show. I am your host, Josh Harris. Thank you to Jake Hari. I don't know how he pronounces it. It's one less letter than my name. For covering for me, had something come up last minute. Jumped in. He's the man. Selfless little dude there. Maybe he's not a little dude. He's probably bigger than I am. But what's going on, Cliffy? How you doing today?
Not too bad. Yeah, Jake did well yesterday jumping in. He said it was his first time hosting probably in a while because you and I have been doing these shows, basically constantly since at least the start of the bubble season. Doing good. Didn't really do so good last night. Winnipeg didn't really come through. It was Vancouver's top line that came through and smashed that slate late for us. So congrats to anybody that was on that top line for the Canucks last night. I was not. I was on Winnipeg. I watched only one period of that game. They didn't seem to be playing that bad, but they weren't it didn't seem like they were generating a lot when that top line was off the ice. Minnesota certainly looks like as if they're rolling. The Jets do have to get healthy. Your boys, the old New York Rangers, got shut out at home last night. They didn't look good. I didn't watch much of that game, but certainly the numbers didn't bear that out, and mixing a lot of things up in practice today. We also have a bunch of teams that played last night on tonight's slate. Boston played last night. Pittsburgh played last night. Calgary played last night. Vegas played last night. So probably should just mention there will be lineup news coming up a little bit later in the day when coaches do their availability, maybe around 6 Eastern, if not a little bit earlier. So if you're a subscriber to Stokastic, make sure you check our members-only Discord for a lineup and injury news. But I didn't do well last night. How would you do?
I didn't even check goalie confirmations and started Marc-Andre Fleury instead of Philip Gustafsson, which was good because I ended up going to bed early. I was out of the house very early yesterday morning, got home pretty late. But normally I wouldn't be a fan of these back-to-backs, but these teams are just coming off like 4 or 5 days off, so it might not be the worst thing in the world for some of these teams. Some of them look pretty rusty. Maybe they'll get back on track. Today, I played Dallas, also played the Rangers' third line. It was pretty ugly. Even if I played Gustafsson, who had a big score, I would have missed cash, so not a big deal. I played light. Days I'm out of the house all day, I try not to play my full volume because I don't get to prepare like I normally do. So we're back at it tonight. This is a little tricky 5-gamer, but we'll navigate y'all through it. But before we do, give us a like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. Once you subscribe, you know what to do. Hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. Also, a lot of you guys in here, don't forget to sign up for the Stokastic Hall of Fame by changing your avatar on DraftKings and FanDuel. You can do that at stokastic.com/avatar. If you finish in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants, either tweet the win to @StokasticHOF on Twitter or email us with your screenshot, and that will get you a free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. Also, I'll give you a shout out on the weekly Hall of Fame segments. There was a new Hall of Fame segment I saw. So I forget who hosted it, but it was like 5 minutes going through the Stokastic Hall of Fame last night. So yeah, check that out. Easy. I mean, it's not easy to finish top 3 in a contest, but if you do, you get a free month, which is nice. Let's get into this 5-gamer here. We got, some pretty big totals on this slate. The Lightning have a big total, but they're at home. Penguins at home with a big total. Vegas has a big road total. So let's hop into it, try to navigate these waters here. We have the Montreal Canadiens with a 2.2 total heading into Tampa Bay. The Lightning have a 3.8 total. Jake Allen, Andrei Vasilevsky confirmed. Habs with the lowest total on the slate, mixing up their lines, going Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki with Joel Armia. Second line of Mike Hoffman, Kirby Dach, Jonathan Drouin. The third line of Slavkovsky, Dvorak, and Anderson. Not really sure that is optimal for DFS. Not that the Habs have like much optimal lines besides Caulfield, Suzuki, Dach, but I think they're just trying to lengthen out their lineup here. But it's probably not going to help as their biggest issues are on the blue line and the net. Justin Barron's going to make his NHL debut. He's not in the DK player pool, and he might get some power play one time, but I don't know if this is the slate for it. Looking at the Tampa side, there is not a tremendous amount of ownership on Tampa 1 here. The most ownership is going to Steven Stamkos. This is as good as a power play as it gets. The Lightning power play with Hedman has been very poor this season, but if there is ever a get right spot, this is the spot.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that Tampa Bay power play because I think it's pretty important. Like power play scoring just in general is very important. I mean, if you look at year-to-year averages, the efficiency of power plays this year is amongst the best it's ever been in NHL history, or at least since they started tracking power play efficiency. It's sitting at 22.4% league-wide. You'd have to go back to the early 80s to get anything close to that. And what's compounding that is 3.26 power play opportunities per game. That's a 10-year high and close to what we saw just before that 2013 lockout. So power play scoring across the league, very important. These are two teams without very good power plays. As mentioned in our Discord, the Montreal power play, their defensemen have 6 power play points combined on the season, while Edmonton's Tyson Barrie has 12 in December by himself. As you mentioned, probably doesn't matter who's running, if Justin Barron's running the top power play or not for Montreal. But to stay with Tampa, yeah, what I wanted to mention was it's not just conjecture or, just watching the game that the Tampa power play looks worse. The numbers are pretty bad. The Tampa top power play unit with Mikhail Sergachev there generates 116 shot attempts and 9 goals per 60 minutes. With Victor Hedman there, it's 91 shot attempts and 6.7 goals per 60 minutes. So a pretty steep drop off. Like 9 would put you probably somewhere around the top 10 in the NHL. 6.7 would put you in the bottom third of the league. It's a pretty big gap. That's not what you want to see from this Tampa power play because they had been so good for so many years. And I'm not sure that it's just a small sample issue or something like that. I was looking at some of Victor Hedman's 5-on-5 numbers, and his scoring chance contributions at 5-on-5 are down about 15% from last year. And when you're talking about defensemen, 15% is a sizable drop off because they don't generate as much as forwards, generally speaking. So he's having trouble generating at 5-on-5. It would stand to reason that the same would apply to the power play. And then the numbers certainly bear that out. So you're right. It is a get right spot for that power play because Montreal penalty kill has generally been pretty bad. The goaltending was something that was saving them through the team's first 25 games, give or take. Really let them down over the last 10 or so. So it is a good spot for Tampa's power play. Top unit staying as consistent as it's been pretty much all season. So obviously you're fine just fully stacking that Tampa 1 line. As you mentioned, not coming in with a ton of ownership. I think the ownership probably comes up a little bit as the day wears on, just because it is such a big total and a reasonable price. I could see them, definitely coming in with more ownership than Pittsburgh's top line, which is in a kind of a similar spot here tonight. So I do think there will be a lot of ownership on Tampa. This is kind of the spot that Boston is in with regards to Pasternak and Stamkos. Stamkos just produces so well on the power play that if you are stacking, you might wind up I would rather play the 4 Tampa forwards and put in Victor Hedman on the blue line. That's just kind of where he is at this point. So I would probably try to find a way to get Steven Stamkos in there. What I want to talk about specifically on the Tampa side is Ross Colton jumping up to the second line for Tampa Bay. I do write about season-long fantasy hockey at a different website. Ross Colton was a guy that I thought might have a breakout season this year, and he's not playing poorly. He's on pace for over 20 goals, and that's playing under 12 minutes a night in Tampa Bay's bottom 6. His scoring chance contributions, what I just mentioned with Victor Hedman, were really, really strong last year. His number was 9.4 per 60 minutes of 5-on-5, in the same range as other wingers like Victor Arvidsson, Andrew Mangiapane, and David Pasternak. This year, it's the exact same number in the 100 minutes that I saw, in the same range with names like Valery Nichushkin, Tyler Toffoli, and Vladimir Tarasenko. A lot of it comes from his individual scoring chances, but the playmaking is getting better. I think that he has the chance to be kind of like the breakout star, or one of the breakout stars of the second half of the season, if he can stay in Tampa Bay's top six. That's the whole problem here, right? Is maybe this, Montreal gets a lucky couple goals, gets up 2-0, and then Ross Colton's back to the bottom six, and they move Alex Killorn back up, or they move Anthony Cirelli up finally, or something like that. Like, I can see that happening pretty easily. That's the problem with stacking Tampa Bay's second line. But I have a lot of faith in Colton's abilities and his skills, and I think he can mesh pretty well with Steven Stamkos, who's become, a little bit of a better playmaker as he's aged. So I don't even mind just full stacking that Tampa second line if if you're worried about Tampa's top line coming in with much higher ownership than what we're projecting, or you want to save a lot of money but still get a piece of the top power play unit. I think you're fine to even go to Tampa too, because they've been using that Tampa second line against opposing second lines. While I think Kirby Dach and Mike Hoffman probably make a decent 2/3 of a line, I don't think Jonathan Drouin. There's a reason why he's been kind of a healthy scratch at times this year. Even if he's been injured and recovering from injury, he's just not playing well. That Tampa second line going into Montreal's middle six, like you said, there's just not a whole lot going on for Montreal on those second and third lines. So I do like the Tampa second line here. They might come in with a lot of ownership, but I do like that trio, adding Ross Colton to Nick Paul and Steven Stamkos. The third line is kind of interesting here. Cirelli and Pat Maroon have been playing pretty well since Cirelli got back to the lineup. 3.7 expected goals for, 2.2 against per 60 minutes. They've been dominant. Now, they have been getting sent out against opposing top lines, and Montreal's top line has typically been fine defensively, but Kirby Dach is the difference maker defensively on that top line. With Caulfield, Suzuki next to Armia is having a bad season of his own. It's not really a terrible matchup for that Tampa third line. So, if you want to dip down and do like a two-man, like Killorn and Maroon or something like that, I don't even think you have to play an expensive Anthony Cirelli. 5,600 on DraftKings. Like, I can't even figure that out. So I don't even mind a cheap two-man from the Tampa third line. I like all Tampa's three lines. I think, it's pretty obvious by the implied goal total. But I think there are options here if you want to go past the Tampa Bay top line. On the Montreal side, honestly, like I said, I don't really like having Armia next to Suzuki. They played a little bit together this year, a little bit together last year. Controlling under 40% of the shot attempts in their 55 minutes together. Joel Armia has awful expected goals impact so far this season. Like, there's a reason why he hasn't really been moved up the lineup, even though they have had injuries on the wing. It's because he's just been playing poorly. Now, I think this is an attempt to kind of get his offensive game going, playing with, maybe their two best offensive players. I just think it'll kind of go the other way, and he'll just drag them down. So I'm not in on Montreal one. I think with Montreal, I'm not stacking anything. It'd be one-offs. Like, I think a one-off Mike Hoffman is certainly just fine. A one-off Josh Anderson is always something that's in play with me. I don't know that I'm stacking anything on the Montreal side. If people have 150 lineups going and want to get a little bit of the top line or something like that, go ahead. But I think it's one-offs for me from the Montreal side. I really do like the Tampa top line, but I kind of like the depth options there better when I look at what you can do playing them with the players on the rest of the slate.
Yeah, real quick. I like Pat Maroon.
Yeah, Patty Maroon.
Patty Maroon.
Patty Maroon. Listen, man, you don't have to be a great hockey player to score against Montreal.
I can't say I wrote down Pat Maroon on my notes. I think like someone like a Ryan Donato would be more my.
Well, it appears as though we've lost Josh real quick. Hopefully he can get back here in relatively short order. I'm going to leave his beautiful face up on the screen for you guys to look at for a little bit. We'll get to the defenseman real quick. As we mentioned, Justin Barron is jumping into the lineup for the Habs. So he could end up running the top power play. He's not in the DK player pool. There's nothing you can do about that. Caden Gooley's been playing a lot of minutes for Montreal. I think he has 2 shot blocks in 3 straight games. Like, he's just been on the cusp of getting that block bonus on DraftKings. So I don't mind Gooley because they might see a lot of volume here tonight, but there's really not a lot I like for blue liners on the Montreal side. On the Tampa Bay side, if people want to play Victor Hedman because they think this is a pretty good power play spot, which it is, and, want to get him in, no issues really with that. But again, power play's just been pretty bad, and I think he's overpriced for what he's done so far this season. It's kind of a legacy pricing thing at this point. Eric Chernak under 3K, playing 21 plus minutes, on average of late. I think he's fine if you need a sub 3K defenseman. I'll just talk about the goalies real quick. Jake Allen, by our lineup builder, which I'll bring up here really quickly. Sorry, wrong button. 8.08 points over on DraftKings, 10.47 on FanDuel. I don't think that's the lowest for any goalie so far this season, but it's certainly not far off either. So not really in on Jake Allen. Don't expect he'll pull Stuart Skinner from last night. So, I guess Vasi definitely has shutout upside, but I think you really need him to get the shutout to hit that upside. And I think that's a little bit of a too big of a risk for me. So I'm going to let both goalies go here. We'll move on to the next one. Boston Bruins 3.2 implied, up to a 3.3 implied goal total. As the day's gone on here. Going into New Jersey to face the Devils. The Devils have a 3.2 implied goal total. Now, in case people have a tough time remembering, because I certainly do as the days wear on, 2 teams played just before the Christmas break. Boston won 4-3 against New Jersey. So obviously these 2 teams, despite being pretty good defensively, can score goals against each other. Linus Ullmark is probably going to start for Boston in this one because it was Jeremy Swayman last night. Ullmark was in net for that 4-3 win, saved 37 of 40 shots. He's been fantastic so far this season. Vitek Vanacek expected to go on the other side here, though neither has been confirmed, at least as I saw when we were starting the show. So New Jersey's going with the lines that they kind of went into the break with. That means Tatar, Hischier, and Fabian Zetterlund on the top line. Second line of Eric Holla, Jack Hughes, and Jesper Bratt, Sharangovich, Bachfist, Mercer. Third line, Tice Thompson drawing in on the 4th line for New Jersey, taking the spot of Alex Holtz. On the Boston side, looks like we got Josh back here. Josh, we're just starting the New Jersey-Boston game. So if you want to just lead us off and give us a little bit of an intro for that game here.
Pat Maroon.
Okay.
I don't know. I missed
the show because of Pat Maroon.
I don't know. I said Pat Maroon. My power went out. I don't know. All right. Boston, the 3.3 total heading to Jersey. The Devils have a 3.2 total. Boston played last night with Jeremy Swayman. It's going to be Linus Ullmark most likely tonight. Vitek Vanacek was in the starters net this morning for the Devils. Now, Devils have a pretty high total here, despite, this is Ullmark is the better goalie here. The Nico Hischier line's probably going into Bergeron. I guess that explains why the Hughes line has so much ownership here, but they're getting higher ownership than the Tampa top line, which doesn't make sense to me. Even though they're going to get the Boston second line, Boston's still a very good team. Ullmark is arguably in the Vezina conversation. Like, I just like if Jack Hughes line is going to be 15, 16%, I going against Boston, I don't want to play them. I think, Boston going into New Jersey is equally as tough of a matchup, and they're getting less ownership. I don't know what to make of this game. Like, both of these top 6 lines are getting more ownership than I want them to, more than I want them to. So, which kind of defaults me to Tampa 1. But I also feel like a lot of this ownership's gonna go to Tampa 1. So I'm not really sure what to make of this game.
Yeah, I think part of it is just the reasonable pricing on that New Jersey line, right? Like Jack Hughes, 7,900. Okay, that's expensive, but Jesper Bratt at 5,500 is considerably less than what we've seen him. He was at 5,600 in that game against Boston just before the break, but he's been pretty much in the 6K range, for a month plus, before that. I think the price drop is certainly part of it. And it's not as if that Hughes Bratt Hollow line has been bad. 3.9 expected goals for, 1.4 against, 3.6 actual goals for per 60 minutes. And the one knock on Bratt for a lot of this season had been his shooting, right? But he has put up 20 shots in his last 5 games. So he's starting to shoot the puck a little bit more. Can't expect him to keep up 4 shots per game, but even if he can stay somewhere around 3, that's a big boost over what he was doing a little bit earlier in the season. Erik Haula continues his non-torrid pace, goal scoring pace this season. I think he's up to 2 goals now, shooting a career worst shooting percentage. So like, I kind of get that, especially where you're right. Like the Hischier line did take the Bergeron line in the matchup in that game just before Christmas. It was, New Jersey 2 out against Boston 2. Boston 2, also pretty good defensively. Not as good as defensively as the top line. I don't think that would be much of a surprise to anyone. Don't generate as much offense, so maybe the Hughes line can get there. That New Jersey third line also pretty good. 3.5 expected goals for, 1.3 against. It's just shooting percentage issues. Shooting percentage issues are the problem for like every New Jersey line. That's been the case pretty much all year. But Mercer, Sharangovich, and Bachfist have played reasonably well. I don't know if I'd full stack them against the Bruins with Allmark in net, but I think you can definitely one-off some guys from that line. So a one-off Mercer or one-off Sharangovich or something like that. I think that's perfectly playable. On the Boston side, what I'll mention is 2 what could be important lineup changes for the Bruins. And a late power play last night against Ottawa the game was 2-2 at that point, I think. They took Hampus Lindholm off the top power play unit, put David Krejci on. Now they have gone with 5 forwards on the top power play at times this year, as more teams seem to be doing that. Montreal's probably going to do that tonight. Toronto's been doing that in their last few games. So it's definitely becoming more popular. Whether they stick with that or not, who knows? Like, we won't know until they get an actual power play in this game. But it could give that Boston second line 2 guys on the top power play unit, which would be a pretty big boost. And the other lineup note is that Taylor Hall spent the second half or the entire third period of the game last night on the second line with Krejci and Pasternak. Now, that's something they've done at times this year and then gone right back to Taylor Hall to the third line. I'm just waiting for the time when they eventually just leave Pavel Zacha on the third line where he should be. Like he's just not good enough offensively to really help push Krejci and Pasternak to, good top 6 scoring numbers. I think, Taylor Hall, at least with Hall, it's, 2.7 expected goals for per 60 minutes. Again, it's just a shooting percentage issue. So I guess we won't know until warmups if Taylor Hall's on the second line. I guess something to watch for in warmups. Honestly, there's just not a ton that I like from the Boston side as far as 3-man stacking goes. Like, I don't want to stack the top line and leave Pasternak off. That's something we've mentioned on the last few shows. Pasternak's just way too involved in the offense, especially on the power play. Now, the Devils typically have a good penalty kill and don't take a lot of penalties. So it's not a great power play spot. But, I think it lends to, just one-offing David Pasternak or something like that if you want. The Boston top line certainly in play here. New Jersey top line is pretty good defensively. We have seen their goaltending let them down at times, but honestly, there's just not a lot from the Bruins I like. If the second line was Pasternak, Krejci, and Hall, like I might stack that against the Hughes line. You know what I mean? Especially if Krejci could get some top power play time, but we won't know until warm up. So for now, I'll just say I think I just kind of like maybe some one-offing some guys in this one. Thomas Tatar's price is reasonable, top power play minutes. That's fine. One-offing David Pasternak if you want to spend up there on a short slate, I think that's fine. But that's probably about it. I think you could see some, even if, these teams do end up like 3-3 going into overtime, I think you could see some spread out scoring. So I don't think I'm stacking anything out of this one, but I'll be quite honest. It feels weird to say that because I think there could be at least 5 playable lines in this game, depending how Boston does their 5-on-5 lines. But I'm just not stacking anything out of here.
Yeah, I don't particularly love this game despite a 6.5 total, which feels bad, but like I don't know, I kind of agree with what you just said. Don't love stacking anything. I guess like if anything it would be Hughes Bratt, but the ownership is pretty high there. I guess you could one off David Pasternak. That's no issue whatsoever there. Let's move to the blue line. I think this is a decent spot for Dougie Hamilton. Like he gets 5-on-5 stuff done as well. I don't know. I don't know if I want to spend up 6,800 here when you have guys like Crystal Tang in a pretty good power play spot. You got Alex Pietrangelo a little bit more expensive in a very, very good power play spot. You have, Rasmus Anderson cheaper in a very good power play spot. So, I mean, like Dougie, I guess is fine. There's just other guys I like more. So I think I'd go to like Siegenthaler or Severson. On the Boston side, I think it's Hampus Lindholm. I think he's fine at 4,900 in Boston stacks or as a one-off. I also don't mind Brandon Carlo.
Yeah, the New Jersey defenseman's kind of tough here because, Marino and Graves are injured. So they are playing Kevin Ball and Nikita Okhotyuk. Is that how that's pronounced? We'll go with that.
Wrong guy.
Yeah, they typically don't play a lot of minutes when they're in. Like Brendan Smith has been up over 20 minutes a game with those guys injured.
Rangers,
and I bet Dougie Hamilton could get up to like 24, 25 minutes tonight, which is, not something that he did through the first 25 games of the season. That's kind of the only reason why I don't really hate playing Hamilton here is that it could be a 25-minute game out of him. It's just whether they generate enough offense that he ends up smashing the slate. But I do think New Jersey has 4 playable defensemen. If I'm not paying up for Hamilton, I think I'll let Severson go, and it'd be Siegenthaler or Smith to try to rack up those peripherals on DraftKings. So depending on what price point you need, I do think there are multiple playable defensemen on the New Jersey side. If I had to pick just one for a point per dollar, I would go with Brendan Smith. But I do think there are multiple guys on the New Jersey blue line that you can play tonight.
Yep. As I mentioned off the top, we are sponsored by BetMGM. We can get you a risk-free bet on BetMGM up to $1,000 and 2 months of Stokastic Platinum for free. All you got to do is sign up. You have to have a Stokastic membership. If you got one, just sign in. If you don't, just make one. It's free and easy. You sign up with BetMGM. You do all that jazz. I got a couple bets on BetMGM. If you want to use that when you sign up, you need to deposit at least $10, depending on your risk-free tolerance. If you want your risk-free bet to be $10, deposit $10. If you want $100, et cetera, et cetera. A couple bets I was looking at today on BetMGM is Victor Hedman anytime assist. That's coming in at -105. And we just talked about how he has not been great at 5-on-5, and this is a good power play matchup. So if you wanted to juice that up a little bit to a power play point, you can get him over 0.5 power play points at +175 if he scores accounts, assist accounts, etc. So your bet must settle to qualify for the Stokastic subscription. After you completed all those steps, you'll receive an email from BetMGM with instructions for redeeming your 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. As always, the best way to get these deals is click the link in the description. It is the top link in the description and go from there. It'll give us credit. We like credit. You like free stuff. It's a win-win-win. And more winning. Who doesn't like winning? Charlie Sheen. Detroit Red Wings with a 2.7 total heading into Pittsburgh. The Penguins have a 3.7 total. Ville Husso is probable. Pittsburgh went last night with Tristan Jarry, so it's probably going to be Casey DeSmith. I've been on the Casey DeSmith is better than Tristan Jarry train for a season and a half here. I don't know what that means for Casey DeSmith other than I don't know. I just haven't been a big believer in the Penguins goalies at all. It's easy to say that after Yard kind of got bombed last night, but I'm kind of hoping Smith gets a decent run here. These Red Wing wines just make me want to play Pat Maroon, apparently.
These lines are looking kind of rough for Detroit. Obviously, Michael Rasmussen top line, Ernie Kopp Raymond on the second line. I dropped it in our Discord earlier, coming from the stats website Evolving Hockey. The three Detroit forwards with the worst expected goals impact on the team are Adam Ernie, Andrew Kopp, and Lucas Raymond, and they're all playing on the same line together. We've not been very kind to Andrew Kopp on this show pretty much all season. He hasn't played well. It's not just us saying that. It's whether you look at the numbers, whether you look at his production, it doesn't matter what you look at. He just hasn't been playing well since signing in the offseason. It is a back-to-back for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh can be a pretty frustrating team because I think one of the beat writers put it well last night. Like, when Pittsburgh's not playing well, which they didn't last night, they looked like garbage against the Islanders. There aren't many teams that look worse in the NHL. And it's just a function of the things they try to do and then fail to accomplish. Like, I think that's a big problem with their power plays. There's always that one extra pass at the blue line or that one extra move just inside the blue line that turns the puck over and then it goes back down the other way. Like, it just seems out of sync at times. And then there are times that they just blow the doors off the opponent. Like, they're a good team, just a little bit inconsistent. It's a good matchup at home against Detroit here. Should be expecting the same lines for the Penguins. The top line has been pretty good for Pittsburgh this season. 3.6 expected goals for, 2.7 against, 3.1 actual goals for, 2.1 against. Jake Gensel hasn't been shooting a lot lately. He's only had 28 shots in his last 10 games. That's not what you want to see from him shot-wise. Last season he was at 3.5 shots per game over a full year. You don't want to see him under 3 over any meaningful stretch. I wonder if the introduction of Rickard Rakell has anything to do there because, Rakell has been shooting the puck a reasonable amount of his own. So maybe they're just kind of splitting shots in a way they weren't with Brian Rust up there. But regardless, they're going to be going into that Detroit top line, which Rasmussen and Perron, their numbers together this year actually haven't been bad. 2.5 expected goals for, 2 against. Now the shooting percentage and save percentage when they've been on the ice have been a little wonky. So lots of goals for, lots of goals against, but they have been playing reasonably well. Like, I think it's probably their best defensive line, which would put Pittsburgh's top line ostensibly in the worst matchup, even though the Pittsburgh top line has been really good. So, it's a fine matchup for Pittsburgh 1. I think it's Pittsburgh 2 that I kind of like here. Brian Rust had got his ice time nuked, benched a little bit last night, only played 14 minutes. Maybe that puts a little bit of a fire under him. But Pittsburgh 2 has been excellent so far this year. 3.7 expected goals for, 2.2 against. The problem is shooting under 6% since Thanksgiving. You got to think that's going to regress eventually. They're going to get a lot of that Raymond and Kopp matchup. Raymond and Kopp certainly have not been good together this year. 1.9 expected goals for, 3.7 expected goals against per 60 minutes. That's just awful. 1.8 actual goals for, 5.2 actual goals against. Like, they're just getting ran over. I think this is a pretty good spot for Pittsburgh too. If you don't want to go with a what I think will be a higher owned Pittsburgh top line. I think Pittsburgh 2 is perfectly fine here. Detroit doesn't take a ton of penalties. Not that Pittsburgh's power play has generally been great this year, better with Raquel, but generally not great. So no, you don't necessarily need perfect power play correlation in this one. If you want to just use Pittsburgh 1, then throw in Evgeny Malkin, make it a power play stack. I think that's perfectly fine here. I would probably try to get Malkin in my lineups one way or another, but I do like that spot for Pittsburgh 2. I think the interesting depth line here is Detroit 3. Let me just kind of talk about that for a second. Kubalik and Pius Suter have 80 minutes together this year, 3.3 expected goals for, 3.1 against per 60 minutes. To put that into context, it's kind of similar to what Nazem Kadri and Andrew Mangiapane were doing in Calgary when they were skating together for, basically the first 2 months of the season. The problem is shooting percentages. They're just shooting 5% in their minutes together. But Pius Suter is having a real nice season by expected goals impacts. Dominic Kubalik, while definitely not on the tear he was on earlier this season, still at 2.7 shots per game since Thanksgiving, which is basically since he got moved off the top line. Like, he's still getting involved offensively. If anything on the Detroit side, I think it's getting it 2-man off that third line, like Kubalik and Suter, Kubalik and Sundqvist, just something like that. I think that's kind of where I'm going. If anything on the Detroit side, for me on Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh 2, but if you want to make it a power play stack, I think that's just fine as well.
Yeah, I wish Kubalik was less expensive on DraftKings. 5,300.
Yeah,
is a bit pricey for a third liner here.
It's kind of like that old Anthony Cirelli, Pat Maroon problem.
Yeah. Let's not crash my computer again. Here's the thing: if you say that the Jack Hughes line on the Devils is the top line, the second line for Pittsburgh is the highest projected second line of the night. And they're getting an unbelievable matchup. Like, Andrew Kopp has not looked good really since he was on the third line in Winnipeg last year. So, like, you get guys like Lucas Raymond, who's barely, like, out of diapers. He's, like, 14 years old. Adam Ernie, like that. This is one of the worst put together lines in the NHL. So I think I agree with you. Pittsburgh 2 would be my preferred option. Now, obviously, if you want to go to Pittsburgh 1, I think that's perfectly fine. But when push comes to shove, I think I like the Tampa top line a bit better than the Pittsburgh top line. So Pittsburgh 1, perfectly fine, but Pitt 2 is where I'm looking. On the Detroit side, if Kubalik was cheaper, I wouldn't mind that third line. I just, I don't think you need to full stack. If you're using those expensive guys, I think, Suter, Sundqvist would be okay. For me, I think I'd rather go with a Larkin Rasmussen or Rasmussen Perron or something like that. But I am definitely not going to be prioritizing Detroit on this slate. So let's move to the blue line. Chris Letang, 5,400, top power play. Detroit doesn't take many penalties, but when they do, their penalty kill hasn't been great. Chris Letang has been shooting the puck more. I know he didn't shoot too much last night, but at that price, I think he's fine to add into your Pittsburgh stacks. Otherwise, not much on the Pittsburgh side. On the Detroit side, Moritz Seider on the top power play, I think, is fine. Jake Wallman, probably still the guy for me.
Yeah, I was waiting to hear that name. Jake Wallman averaging 20 minutes in his last 5 games, 16 shots and 12 blocks in those 5 games. He's been getting the job done peripherally. I was looking at why he's not scoring points. There's something called individual points percentage, and it's the rate at which a player gets a point when his team scores a goal with him on the ice. Defensemen, really good defensemen can be depending on what strength, can be, around 40, 50%. A lot of defensemen around the 30 to 40% mark. Wallman's at 12% in his 16 games. That's going to regress pretty heavily over, the final 50 games of the season or whatever he's going to play. I think he's going to see a pretty big uptick in his point production, even on a bad team, in the second half. I do like Wallman at 3K. I think if things go well for him, go right for him over the next month, he'll be like a 4K-ish defenseman. So I do like Wallman. Chris Letang, obviously just fine if you want to put him in with your Pittsburgh stacks. Shout out to everybody that played Pierre-Olivier Joseph last night. I think the guy that won the $12 single entry on DK had him. Wasn't getting down that deep. Probably Wallman is the guy that I honestly like the most in this game. Cedar's just not doing a lot this year.
Yeah. Remember when the Wings traded Nick Leddy to the Blues for Jake Wallman? We are laughing.
Yeah.
And then the Blues signed him to a 4x4, which is just hysterically awful. Sorry, Haas. Let's move on to the next one. Vegas Golden Knights with a 3.4 heading into Anaheim. The Ducks have a 2.7. Vegas is on a back-to-back on the road. They went with Logan Thompson last night, so it's probably going to be Aiden Hill. And John Gibson is confirmed. It looks like Jonathan Marchessault will be back tonight. That will push Michael Amadio down to power play 2. He'll stick up on that top line, though, with Chandler Stevenson and Mark Stone. Second line would be Smith, Carlson, Marchessault. You had I don't want to call it a rant. You had some like a informational on the Ducks when the top line is off the ice. I'll let you talk about that. I do have some interest in the Ducks top line tonight just because I'm not a huge believer in Aiden Hill, and that Vegas top line without Eichel isn't great. I think, that Vegas second line, we'll have to wait. Marchessault's $7K on DraftKings. The Ducks depth is awful. So going to that Knights second line is fine. I want to see an ownership run with Marchessault in. Other than the Ducks top line, though, other than in the depth, maybe some Mason McTavish for the power play, but it's top line or bust for the Ducks.
Yeah, what I mentioned was with the Anaheim top line on the ice this year, the team is controlling nearly 54% of the expected goals at 5-on-5 and nearly 54% of the actual goals. So they're an actual NHL top 6 line. That's why we keep playing them. When they're off the ice, it's under 30% of the goal share and 35% of the expected goal share. That's any line that's on the ice when Henrik Zegras and Terry aren't there. That's just AHL numbers. If you have a guy performing consistently at a 35% expected goal share, he goes to the AHL. They can't demote the entire team, so they got to stick this out for another 45 whatever games. We don't even know what the Anaheim Ducks lines are going to be like. The ones that we have in our lineup builder are kind of from the last game, but honestly, just go look at the last game. There were dozens of forward combinations that they used. They stuck with the top line, which is what they normally do. But everybody else was just completely jumbled around. Good luck trying to pick any pair of forwards outside the top line that actually start and finish the game together. So, yeah, if you want to one-off McTavish, I think that's fine. Frank Vetrano, he's shooting the puck at least. So if you want to one-off him, that's fine. But, yeah, top line or bust for me from the Ducks. Not sure I'll be getting to the Anaheim top line if they come in with double-digit ownership. I get that they're reasonably priced. And if the Ducks score 3 or 4 goals, they'll probably be involved. But they're right in line with the Vegas top line. Honestly, I would rather play the Vegas top line. It's still the Anaheim Ducks. What are we even talking about here? The problem with the Vegas second line, as it's been, even with Marchessault there, is shooting percentage. They're only scoring 2.1 goals per 60 minutes this year, despite generating over 3.1 expected goals, because it's shooting 6.5% at 5-on-5. I was looking to see how bad it was the prior 2 seasons. In the prior 2 seasons, shooting 7.2%. So it's not as if the 6.5% this year is very far off. It's pretty much right in range with what they normally do. So that's the problem with stacking Vegas too, is that they can generate a lot of shots, just not a lot of goals. So I think I'd be more apt to 2-man, like a Marchessault and a Smith, or a Carlson and a Marchessault, something like that, rather than just full-on 3-man stacking. They can get lucky with shooting percentage in any game, but it just feels like a little bit of a long shot, even if this is the Anaheim Ducks. I'm going to be honest. I don't mind the Vegas top line. Michael Amadio is a guy that been kind of high on as a playmaker for a number of years. He's just never been able to really stick around anywhere. the Vegas team seems to like him. In a small sample with Mark Stone this year, they have a shot share at around 60%, which is really, really strong. I'm thinking he keeps his power play role even with Marchessault back. I think they just leave the top line together and add Marchessault and take Riley Smith and move him to the second power play unit. So you could get perfect correlation on the top Vegas line as well. Like if this Vegas line, honestly, if that line comes in anywhere around 10%, it's the Anaheim Ducks. It's probably the worst team in the NHL. If they're going to come in around 10% on a 5-game slate, yeah, I'm going to play the top line even with Michael Amadio there. So I do like Vegas 1 here. If you want to play Vegas 2, go right ahead. Honestly, I'd rather play Vegas 1 at lower ownership. That's just kind of the way it is. Vegas 3, I think, is in play just because of how bad Anaheim is. But they're actually carrying reasonable ownership, like over 3% on DraftKings, which is more than double of the Detroit line that I just talked about. So I think I'd rather just do what you said. And if you want to go super cheap, do like a Suter Sundqvist from Detroit 3 rather than go with Vegas 3. But yeah, if you want 2-man carrier and Roy or something like that, I think that's in play. But I think it's both top lines in this game that I like the most. And I would obviously be leaning to Vegas 1 here.
Yeah, ownership aside, I think the Vegas third line is my favorite third line that you've mentioned today, just because William Carrier, the real Wild Bill, is probably my favorite third. And he's like priced appropriately too.
Yeah.
Roy Carrier, 2-man, 5,900. It's not going to break the bank. Putting in like Kubalik, who might play 13 minutes. That Vegas third line, they get like consistently 13 to 15 minutes. And it's the Ducks depth. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Fair enough.
Like, yeah, after 4%, oh well. Like, I think Carrier can score. I'm not sure if Pat Maroon can score unless like a puck goes in off his big dump truck in front of the net. But like, yeah, I was kind of I forgot the word, but I kind of wanted to see William Carrier up on that top line with Stevenson and Stone when Eichel went down. But yeah, I guess they like him in the bottom 6 role. So yeah, Vegas 3 is my favorite third line that you mentioned between
them. Just
to
jump in real quick about Marchessault. It's not confirmed that he's in yet. I've looked at a couple different Vegas beat writers, and I haven't seen a confirmation that he's going to be in. It's just that he's on the trip with the team, so they're assuming he's at least available tonight.
Okay.
That could make a little bit of a difference considering how expensive Marchessault is, and this is a late game.
Yeah, that's kind of a big deal. He's in our lineup builder. That's why I assumed. You know what assuming does? It makes an ass out of you and me. But it's a 10 p.m. game if you are interested in using Marchessault. If you don't get news, just keep swaps ready. I also like Mason McTavish, technically a third liner as well. I like him on the third line. Let's move to the blue line here. Cam Fowler running power play 1 for the Ducks, 3,900. Don't mind him. He's very point reliant though. So if you don't think that the Ducks are going to get there, I wouldn't play Fowler. If you are playing the Ducks, I think you can add him in. Dmitry Kulikov, 3,200 would probably be the other guy on the Vegas side. Alex Pietrangelo at 7K, I think is perfectly fine. This is a very good power play spot. He gets peripherals. Alec Martinez also got hurt last night. There was obviously not going to be much update on him. If he's out, don't mind like Braden McNabb or Daniil Miramonov.
Yeah, you mentioned Cam Fowler. I was looking at his game logs earlier. He has 1 game this year with 15 DraftKings points where he didn't score a goal. You want to talk about being point reliant. Like, this isn't a guy that's going to go out and get a shot and a block bonus for you and just smash even if he stays off the score sheet. That's kind of the problem with playing Fowler. But yeah, where he's running the power play and plays so many minutes, he's obviously just fine. Nick Hague's projecting super well with Alec Martinez injured last night. He's probably going to play some pretty heavy minutes again. Like Hague was up around 25 minutes last night. Probably one of my favorite defensemen in that 3K range on the slate.
Yeah, this slate is quite the doozy as we're getting through it here. We have a 3-day free trial for your new users. It's risk-free, and it gives you everything that we have to offer for NHL. Most important part, as always, click the link in the description below. You get projections, ownership, top stacks tools, rankings, everything you need. There's the top stacks tool, the top stacks tool that Cliffy has up on the screen. Here's the lineup builder. I know you and Jake went through kind of a lineup yesterday. You put Lane Peterson in there. You lost me there, but that's the kind of stuff you can go through. It has all the great stuff that is very good. Access to our Discord, which is invaluable for late news. There's a bunch of really sharp minds in there. Yeah, so if you are on the fence about joining the Stokastic crew, click the link in the description below. Give everything a test drive for that 3-day free trial. If you don't like it, which if you don't, you're lying. You'll like it, then you get a subscription, but you can try everything out for 3 days. Let's get to the last game of the night. The Calgary Flames with a 3 total heading into Seattle. The Kraken have a 3 total as well. Daniel Vladar, Philip Grubauer, probable. Flames played last night as well. They lost with Markstrom in net. Looks like Seattle going with McCann, Beniers, Eberle, Schwartz, Wenberg, Burakovsky, Donato, Gord, Bjorkstrand. Same lines for the Flames, assuming the Muppet doesn't blow them up. Like, again, here we are with the Seattle conundrum. The Seattle conundrum is you never know which line to stack because they have 3 playable lines. And on the flip side, they're, stacking against them. They're a good defensive team. They just have awful goaltending. So this game is kind of like, it feels like you can avoid it, but it also feels like important because if Seattle goaltending is bad, this is a pretty good power play spot because of it. You're going to want to get some Flames. They're not getting much ownership. And on the flip side, Flames are back-to-back on the road. So playing some Kraken might make some sense.
Yeah, I'll start quickly on the Seattle side. It'd be the McCann, Beniers, Eberle line that I would go to. Now, they're definitely running hot this season. They're shooting over 19% in their 180-minute sample. Like, half that would be a reasonable rate. But they are controlling the play when they're on the ice. 2.6 expected goals for, 1.9 against. So they are running the show when they are together, and they typically don't play against top lines. Like, they'll probably play against Huberdeau, Kadri, and Lucic here. I don't think this should be a big surprise, but in a 90-minute sample with Kadri and Lucic together, defensive numbers aren't great. 2.8 expected goals against, 4.6 actual goals against. I think the softest matchup on the Calgary side is that second line, and that's the line that McCann, Beniers, and Eberle will get. Eberle has been shooting a little bit more. He's at like 2.7, 2.8 shots per game over his last 16 games, basically half their season, which is really nice to see because he wasn't shooting that much earlier in the season. Eberle and McCann, both on they were on the top power play unit before the holiday, but this team changes up their power play unit seemingly like every game. So, I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter. But McCann's having a nice season of his own, even if he's shooting percentage a little bit high. So I think the best matchup for Seattle is McCann, Beniers, Eberle line. Schwartz, Wenberg, Burakovsky is kind of interesting, but they haven't necessarily been playing that well together this year. Break even by expected goal share. Same thing with that Seattle third line, below water by expected goal share. So it's Seattle 2 that I think has been their best line, at least since this something approaching this iteration of the lines was put together. So McCann, Beniers, Eberle. On the Flame side, Dylan Dubé reminds me of Joel Armia, which probably isn't a good thing. You just watch him in the offensive zone. Like, he's kind of shifty. He can get the puck around a defender, and then he'll just whip the puck to where he thinks someone is, and the guy's just not there. And then, he basically just ices it himself. I saw him do that at least once last night. Turns the puck over. Like, I just don't think he's a good fit on that top line. They do have good numbers in a small sample together. But it's not as if, Calgary played Edmonton last night. So, it's not like they're playing the super stiff competition. Their last 5 games were San Jose twice, Los Angeles, Anaheim, Edmonton. Not exactly a murderer's row of team for the Calgary top line to rack up some good stats against. So Yeah, I think they're fine. But honestly, I think it's the Calgary third line that I like the best. Mangiapane, Backlund, and Coleman. Really, really good in a small sample together. 94 shot attempts per 60 minutes in their 55 minutes together. That's a power play. And the Donato, Gord, Bjorkstrand line for Seattle hasn't been particularly good, specifically Gord and Bjorkstrand. Bjorkstrand's struggling defensively this year. So Calgary 3, Seattle 1 is what I'm taking from this game.
Yeah, I agree on the Seattle side with McCann, Beniers, Eberle. Not always, but they've been my preferred option recently. On the Flame side, it's just kind of tough just because, the 5-on-5 matchup, you're going to want to play Mangiapane, back and Coleman against that Gord, Donato, Bjorkstrand line. But at the same time, if Seattle takes a bunch of penalties and their goaltending lets them down, Flames could score a couple power play goals here, and you're going to want the power play guys. I would lean towards Lindholm to fully Dubé. If you want to leave Dubé off, that's fine. I have been leaving him in. I just don't want to play Kadri, Lucic, Huberdeau. They're going to get a tough 5-on-5 matchup. If you want to leave off Dubé and add in a Huberdeau for more power play, that's fine. But I think my preferred option on the Calgary side is that top line. Both of these top lines are my preferred option. If you want to take some pieces of that third line, I think that's perfectly fine as well. Lots of third lines Cliffy likes tonight. I like the Vegas third line, Calgary third line for sure the best. Let's move to the blue line here. If you are going to use that top line for Seattle, I think the defenseman you want to use for the power play is Vinny Dunn. Vinny Dunn runs the McCann unit. Justin Schultz runs the Beniers, Wenberg, Bjorkstrand, Sprong unit. They split power play time, but Vinny Dunn plays more 5-on-5, so I just kind of go to him there. Jamie Alexiak is all right. Adam Larson, a bit pricey, but he's okay. On the Flame side, I think it's Rasmus Anderson or Chris Tanev for me.
Yeah, probably Anderson. I think Hanifin, he's kind of running out of steam a little bit. He was putting up great peripherals earlier in the season. He's got 19 straight games without a shot bonus, under 2 shots per game in that span. That's not what he was doing earlier in the season, which probably lends me to go to Anderson, because you're right, it is a good power play spot. So if you want to put Anderson in instead of Dubé, put him with Lindholm and Toffoli or something like that, I think is perfectly fine. Will agree on Jamie Alexiak. Don't mind him at sub 3K. Justin Schultz, his power play unit has typically been the better Seattle power play unit. Calgary does have a good penalty kill, but takes a lot of penalties. They're kind of like Boston in that sense. So don't mind Justin Schultz here.
Yep. Coming up after us at 5 p.m., the NBA Deeper Dive with EMAC and Adam, and then NBA Live before lock at 6 p.m. with Greg and Eric. 10 goalies on the slate. Huh?
Just to jump in real quick, should we put together a quick lineup like we did yesterday, just a sample lineup of some of the plays that we liked here so far on this slate?
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's bring up our trusty lineup builder. We're going to build a DraftKings lineup. Who are we going to use as a primary stack here on this slate?
I think if you're spending up, you have to pick between Tampa 1 and Pittsburgh 1.
Okay, well, we'll just go with Tampa 1 then. Seems easy enough. They're going to bash the brains in out of my Habs anyway, so probably fair to go with that. I was wondering, you can probably fit Vegas 1 in with that, right?
Let's try it. That's the beauty of the lineup builder.
Yeah, because if you put in the Vegas top line, which we just put in, you can see on the right side of your screen. We probably need to go with a cheap-ish goal. We don't even need a cheap goalie. We could start Allmark if you want.
What does that leave us for a defenseman?
3,150 each, so we can put in a $3,500 defenseman somewhere.
We got to put in our boy Jake Wallman.
Oh yeah, can't forget about Wallman. Got to put in Wallman. Give me the Wallman. All right, 3,300 for a defenseman. We could use Siegenthaler. We could use Chernak. We could use Nick Hague. Hague's probably the guy going with a Vegas stack, don't you think?
Yeah, because they'll be playing together 5-on-5. So yeah.
All right, let's do that. There we go. Tampa 1, Vegas 1. Wallman, Haig, and Ullmark, 92.87 projection on DraftKings. Just a sample lineup for everybody to use. See how easy it is to build a lineup as you're just following along, or as you're just sitting at your desk, or if you're just enjoying some off time on the holidays. Pretty easy if you're just going with a few lineups to just use our lineup builder and put together what you like and see what fits.
Yeah, it is one of my favorite tools. I use it all the time. You can also export your lineups too. If you find one that you really like, you can export it so you don't forget, like me. Yeah, so 10 teams playing tonight, 10 goalies. This feels like a really shaky slate for goalies. Not really different than any other night, but who do you like in net?
I think my number one is Ullmark. I'm going to pay up a little bit for him. He just had a really good game against New Jersey. He's been really good all season long. I think there's a good chance of both volume and not giving up like 5 goals. So I think Ullmark. If you want to kind of ride the lightning a little bit here tonight, I think John Gibson, 7,100 at home against Vegas, as long as he doesn't give up 5 goals of his own, probably in play. I'll mention Philly Husso, another cheap goalie on the road against Pittsburgh. Kind of, I think it's kind of like the Stuart Skinner spot for Edmonton last night. Could see some reasonable volume at a cheap price. Don't mind Husso. So Ullmark if I'm paying up a little bit, Gibson, Husso if I'm paying down.
Yeah, I'll just talk about real quickly. I think like the two goalies for like cash games, I don't know if they're great GPP plays. Andrei Vasilevsky, 8,500. This is a very winnable matchup for Tampa Bay. You just worry about paying up 8,500 for goalies in GPPs. They have to get a shutout really to hit value here. There is some shutout equity for sure here for Tampa Bay tonight. Montreal is the lowest total on the night. So if you want to spend up for Vasilevsky, I think that's fine. Also, Casey DeSmith at 8,100. I don't think there is as much shutout equity here, but I think, paying up for him if you don't want to spend for Ullmark on the road is perfectly fine. Who are you liking for your hat trick pick tonight?
Considering how much faith I've had in him over the last, let's call it 15 months, and the fact that he's finally getting a spot on the second line, I'm going with Ross Colton from Tampa Bay.
I got worried there for a second. You're going to say Pat Maroon, and my my laptop was just going to implode.
Just go right out the front window.
Yeah, just whee. Let's see here. I'm going to go. I don't know who I'm going to go here. This slate is, as the people call, not great. I'm going to go a little bit spicy. I'm going to go Brian Rust.
I like it. We like the Pittsburgh second line, so maybe he gets there for us here tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. I haven't sniffed the power play pick yet. I have been picking some ridiculously bad people, but that is my own fault. So for Slim Cliffy, I am Josh Harris. We will be back tomorrow for a nice medium-sized slate on your Thursday afternoon. So click those links in the description, sign up for all that jazz. We'll see you in Discord. Say what's up. I came from YouTube. And good luck, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Good luck, everyone.